Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Checkerboard Chat. I guess it's been about a week since we've had one. I hope everyone had a good Thanksgiving break. But we're here to talk a little Tennessee sports before we head into Christmas break. Obviously, football. They finished their season with Vanderbilt. They had a win there. Basketballs, they're heating up. They're getting towards the end of their non-conference schedule, and the same thing with for the women's. So there's a lot of sports going on. But just how are y'all doing? Right now, I'm joined by Ethan Stone, Riley Thomas, and Andrew Peters. As always, just how are we doing today?
I'm
Doing
doing
well.
well. Yeah, we're on Zoom, so there's going to be a lot of people talking over each other at some point during this podcast, but
Yep,
that's okay.
that's all right. We live and we learn. We tried to be we're trying to get a pot out for the people, so we make sacrifices sometimes. And today we're on Zoom, so here we are.
That's right. That's right. It's gonna be, not as good as normal. I don't want to say that. It's gonna be just as good as normal because we're great personalities. We're so knowledgeable about sports. But let's
That's
kick
right,
it off.
Josh. Don't dog us too much now.
Yeah, let's kick it off with recapping Vanderbilt. Tennessee gets a win there, 45-21. So they finished their season 7-5. I believe that's Tennessee's best record by a first-year head coach since Lane Kiffin in 2009. So we talked a lot about Lane Kiffin back in the Ole Miss week, and he was kind of his name was thrown around for the coaching job. I don't think very seriously. I don't think that was a real option in a lot of people's minds. But here Josh Heupel comes in, kind of exceeds expectations of what people might have called, an underwhelming hire, and finishes at 7-5, and bowl eligible. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But just as far as Vanderbilt goes, the defense actually came through with the score first, as opposed to where the offense had been so fast. It was first drive of the game on Vanderbilt, so the offense didn't even have a chance. But was it Theo Jackson gets the pick six that just kind of sets the tone for the day, and it was all Tennessee from there. Cedric Tillman had two touchdowns. Jabari Small had two touchdowns. So Ethan, I guess I'll just start with you. What was kind of your biggest takeaway from the game from now that Tennessee's in their season finale?
Yeah, so I was actually at a wedding for that. I watched the game afterwards, and I wasn't able to watch in the press box, but what I took from it just was I'm not sure if you guys know this, but Tennessee is 5-5 now against Vanderbilt in the last 10 years or 10 seasons, which you know is kind of sad, especially given the where Vanderbilt's sitting right now in the SEC East, and so it's just I guess seeing what Heupel was able to do in this first season. Obviously, 7 wins is the most of any first year head coach this year, but seeing that he's just done losing to the bottom of the SEC East, he's done competing with the bottom of the SEC East. I mean, you had the blowout against Missouri, you had the blowout against South Carolina, and obviously another blowout of Vanderbilt. It was, I mean, the score I think it was 45-21. The score doesn't really show it. It was a pretty dominating performance, especially in the second half. I know there was some fans that were a little upset after the first. That especially the Hail Mary obviously is kind of a thing of concern, but that's neither here nor there. I feel like it was kind of a microcosm of the entire season as a whole. Like Heupel and Tennessee just aren't going to be losing to Vanderbilt anymore.
Yeah, kind of going off that too. Back in the beginning of the season, we, fans, media, there wasn't really any expectations at all. Honestly, I think people thought Tennessee get to 5 wins, maybe six. But this season has been a happily surprised, to say the least. I mean, the offense doing what they do, the defense playing at a better level than previously expected, and just having, 69 scholarship players, like the lowest depth of anybody in like the Power Five, and to go 7-5, go 500 in the SEC. I feel like that's kind of unheard of, and that's just a testament to this coaching staff, the hard work they've done, and how much Coach Heupel has bought into this. Back like you said, Josh, back when Tennessee hired him, people were like, is this guy really going to be this good? Did Danny White just hire his buddy? But honestly, we got kind of lucky. And, let's just be real, because I don't know if Heupel, he probably wasn't the first guy clearly on Danny White's list, but it turned to be the best guy. So, and we're happy that he's here. And obviously now with Oklahoma being open, but he debunked that immediately on Tuesday in the Eric Ainge show. So I think Vol fans can be happy and secure. They've got their guy for at least one more year. You know, college football, as crazy as it is, it's year to year at this point, sadly. So Tennessee fans can be happy. Got Heupel for one more year. So
Yeah, I think it's interesting to note also, just I mean, with all the coaching stuff that's gone along, obviously Brian Kelly and Lincoln Riley, that's kind of a story for a different topic, I guess, for a podcast. But just knowing that Heupel's probably going to stick around for a long time because you can tell the amount of care he has for the players and for the team. I mean, he didn't know any of these guys. Obviously, it's his first year, and he obviously exceeded expectations with one of the hardest schedules in the nation. And then you got guys like Alontae Taylor that aren't going to be playing anymore. You got guys like possibly Hendon Hooker, who knows? But you can tell he cares about them. He's not just going to be a guy that kind of jets off to Oklahoma. At least I don't think so. I don't think he would be. You never really know. I mean, people said that about Lane Kiffin too, I'm sure. And look how that turned out. But he seems to be a guy that's really loyal and really wants to build this program back to what it was in the 90s and the 80s and the early 2000s.
Yeah, kind of on that same vein. I think I've talked about it before on some of the past episodes, but at almost every press conference that I can think of that Josh Heupel has done, from now and back until this summer, pretty much every time, very organically, at some point he would come up like, man, I just love competing with these guys. I love being here with these guys. I mean, and I think at almost every time. So, kind of to your point, Ethan, I think that there's no desire for Josh Heupel to leave the program. And it might be a year to year thing just with how college football is at this point, but I don't know. To me, it seems like he came here, he chose here, and maybe Danny White was here, so it's a factor, but just talked about just the atmosphere and just how big of a college football town Knoxville is and how big it can be. So I don't really think he's going to be leaving anytime soon.
Yeah, just to kind of echo that statement. I mean, even on the press conference on Saturday, he was almost getting emotional talking about how much he cares about these guys, how much he wants them to succeed at the next level, and whether that's NFL or having a career after college. So yeah, I just echo that statement. He really cares about these guys a lot. So
Andrew, how was your experience in the press box in my behalf?
Yeah, it was great. Josh guided me well through all the food and snacks throughout, and also through the crowded concourse getting to the post game press conference. But yeah, it was a great experience. It was fun being around all those guys.
Yeah,
I think there's got to be a better way to get from the press box down to the media area, because right now you have to walk down the stairs and like through the concourse where everybody else is. I mean, there's got to be a secret tunnel or something that we don't know about because we're rookies or whatever. But it's always interesting trying to guide through there.
Yeah, you have to cover ball sports for at least 5 years until they tell you where the secret tunnel is.
That's it.
I actually believe in that conspiracy theory. I think there's a way to get there. Some people just seem like they know what they're doing. The elevator needs to go down further. No one listening to this knows what we're talking about, but the press box is very nice, and then we just have to walk 7 miles to where Heupel and everyone else is going to be. So
huge problems. But let's kind of talk about maybe some of, I don't know how the best way to describe Tennessee's future, but Tennessee obviously has some notable seniors. In the past week or so, Alontae Taylor and Velus Jones, I believe it was just the two of them were invited. I think they accepted the invite to the Senior Bowl. And I think you mentioned it a little bit earlier, Ethan. Alontae Taylor, because of injury, he's not going to be playing in Tennessee's bowl game. So obviously there's some questions there. They're both gone, but Hendon Hooker is another one where his future at Tennessee is kind of up in the air right now. He did not, for what it's worth, he did not go through any of the senior day activities Saturday against Vanderbilt. Obviously, doesn't mean anything one way or the other. But after the game, of course, he wasn't rushed to make a decision. He says, he'll make it when the time is right. He's still thinking about it. Got what's best for him and his family and everything else. So uncertainty there. Anyone have any thoughts about what Hooker might be doing this year and next year? Is he coming back?
I mean, personally, I'll be shocked if he leaves. I really will, because of what he did this season, coming in Pittsburgh afterwards and starting. I just think he's got such a more high of a ceiling now that he's got a year under his belt, a year in his offense, another year to prepare in the spring, summer. I just think he could do a lot better and even better, raise his stock even more. Because obviously he did that this season, but one more year, do it again. I just don't see it happening. Like Jabari Small said in his press conference, you stayed here 1 year. Imagine what you could do in year two. So I will be shocked if he leaves. I truly will.
I can see it kind of being 50-50 really, because he's a good enough talent to make the NFL right now. The question is kind of to what Riley was saying. He can get so much better. It's like I remember Cordero Patterson. Obviously, he's lighting the NFL up right now. When he left early, Vols fans were like, "Dude, if you stay one more year, you could be like one of the better wide receivers in the draft." And I think that might be a similar situation to Hendon Hooker right now. I think he stays one more year. He could be first, second round pick. He really could. Especially considering coming out of Virginia Tech, he was a good quarterback. He wasn't exactly what he is now. I feel like Heupel has really kind of put him at his highest level, giving him a system that he can succeed in, giving him pointers, for lack of a better word, that he can use to his advantage. And you give him another year of that with, probably some still good receiving, returning, and just all that. He could be a really, really, really good player on top of what he already is right now.
Yeah, I guess the question with that is always just in college football, one injury can change everything, right? It takes one game, one tackle, even, get sacked one time and he breaks his leg or whatever whatever the injury may be, and then there's his career. So I can definitely see it going either way. I mean, right now he's still probably going to get drafted, still probably going to make a lot of money, and that's just going to be hard to turn down, frankly. That's security of just going ahead and getting in the NFL and getting paid. But as you mentioned, the potential is there for Hendon Hooker. So I don't know that decision is coming anytime soon. Probably won't be before Tennessee's bowl game, I would imagine. But that's always a way. But it is just something to watch. But speaking of the bowl game, Tennessee 7-5. They got the invite, or they locked up the invite a couple weeks ago. Finished the season 7-5. There's some possibilities as far as what bowl game Tennessee has, where they might go. Some of those, Music City Bowl. I think that's in Nashville, right? The Duke's Mayo Bowl. That's in Charlotte. The Gator Bowl in Jacksonville. Liberty Bowl. Kind of more out there is maybe the Outback Bowl. No, didn't mean to make a pun there, but just I don't know. In your eyes, what's maybe the most likely bowl for Tennessee? Where do you want to see them go?
I think the most likely is going to be, honestly, the most likely is probably Music City. I think it's going to be Duke's Mayo. I've been saying that for a while now. I just think it would be a really interesting matchup between Tennessee and like Clemson, or Tennessee and NC State. Tennessee at 7-5. The thing that's interesting about that is, like, the bowl committee is going to want Tennessee over a Mississippi State or Kentucky. Even a team that has a better record like Kentucky, they're going to want to take Tennessee just because of their fans. And like a matchup like Tennessee Clemson is going to be really, really hard for the bowl selection people to go away from. Because obviously, like, I don't even know how long it's been since Tennessee's played Clemson, but two rabid fan bases that compete for recruits because they're, within a couple of hours of each other, the schools are. And so I think that would be a really interesting matchup. I'm I'm looking forward to seeing if my prediction is true on that. But that's what I'm thinking right now. What I think is more likely that a lot of projections have had is like Tennessee versus Wisconsin or Tennessee versus Minnesota in the Music City Bowl.
Yeah, I'm gonna probably agree with you, Ethan. The two that are definitely likely are Music City and Outback. Belk Bowl or the Duke's Mayo Bowl. Excuse me, I am all over the place. It used to be the Belk Bowl. I think it's the Duke's Mayo, or the Music City. I think I'm gonna lean towards Music City, just because Nashville struggled so much with COVID, and they could use a game like this to get money back, and all that good stuff. But kind of like the other bowls, I don't think the Outback or like the Gator Bowl. Gator Bowl is not likely because that was the last bowl Tennessee played in 2 years ago. They don't want to do that again, even though a great crowd, but that won't happen again. Outback Bowl, like the Citrus Bowl, Tennessee has a good record, but not as good as A&M's, Arkansas's, even Kentucky for that matter. So they'll do that one. So I think it's Music City or the Duke's Mayo, and I would love to play Clemson or Wisconsin because they have two good defenses. I want to see how the offense stacks up against those two defenses and just see how they play.
Yeah, I agree with both of you guys. I think it's either Duke's, Mayo, or Music City. But real quick, the last time Tennessee played Clemson was 2004 in the Peach Bowl. Clemson won 27-14. So could be a revenge game for the Vols.
I'll say I want that to happen really badly. I think that would just be such an interesting game. And kind of going back to my point, if it was the Music City, I think the most interesting game would be Tennessee, Wisconsin, just because kind of like Riley alluded to, they just match up so well. Like Wisconsin has zero offense and a very good defense, and Tennessee has a very good offense and like kind of a middle of a ground defense, but obviously not as good as Wisconsin's right now. That would just be an interesting.
And I believe that'll all get announced Sunday the 5th, right? We'll know then as far as what Tennessee's bowl game will be. And I believe all the ones we're talking about now, they're all on this side of the new year. So, late December. So regardless of excuse me, of when it is, we'll have coverage of that as always at UTK Daily Beacon. Let's transition into men's basketball now. I think Tennessee played Presbyterian Tuesday night. They get a big win there, 86-44. Very dominant win. It looks like all the areas that they kind of struggled with against Tennessee Tech, they won that game. But Tennessee Tech had a little bit of an upset scare early on. But Tennessee against Presbyterian, their shooting was much better. Their defense was much better. Been a 3-point team all year. That was kind of back in the light, so to speak. So just again, what are your biggest takeaways from this game?
I think Tennessee, I know this is a crazy take here. Tennessee plays really well when they shoot the ball well. Have you noticed? From deep especially, I think Tennessee was 51% from deep. Justin Powell was 5 of 5. Victor Bailey showed up. He was 50% from 3 himself. And just Tennessee has so many good shooters from outside range that it's hard for teams to stop when they're all firing on all cylinders. And, kind of like Barnes was alluding to earlier in the season, when you have players that are shooting well from outside, they have to, it's a pretty simple calculus. They have to put people on them, and then you just throw it down low to Brandon Huntley-Hatfield, to Fulkerson, to Kamwa, who's having a really good year and had a pretty decent game against Presbyterian. But Tennessee's really making it a guard show, which is really interesting, but not exactly out of the ordinary for Rick Barnes. It's just he hasn't had the guards that have been able to run that offense before, and Zakai Ziegler being better than anticipated, Kennedy Chandler being as anticipated, and then Santiago Vescovi just getting better, or Vescovi, sorry, however you want to say it. But back to what I was saying, just with all of them playing at a fairly high level right now, this team's ceiling is through the roof if they can just have a good shooting night like they did against Presbyterian. And not to mention that, obviously Presbyterian's not exactly a fantastic offensive team, but defensively, it was probably the best game Tennessee's played all season. If they were playing a better team, it would have still probably been a pretty similar outcome just because they were keeping to their assignments. I think there were 6 blocked shots throughout the game. Kennedy Chandler had 7 steals, which I think was a program record or a tie for a program record. And so they're just firing on all cylinders on Tuesday night against Presbyterian.
I was just gonna say, yeah, don't be an idiot, Ethan, and say Ves could be wrong. But I think what we're seeing now too is the emergence of Brandon Huntley Hatfield. You know what's crazy to me? He's 17. He should still be in high school right now. So like we're finally see him come alive a little bit. Okay. Wake up a little bit, play good. And then obviously in Tennessee Tech, he was getting buckets. Like they could not stop him. And the Presbyterian, he played really well again. I think he's finally getting used to the college game. Took him a little bit, and we're going to see it for real on Saturday and come Tuesday night in MSG.
Yeah, and also just to your point, I just want to add really quickly, not only Brandon Huntley Hatfield, Sakai Ziegler should be a high school senior as well. I mean, Barnes has just got all sorts of dudes out there that should not be playing on the court. I mean, especially considering he's got a Uruguay native in Veskovi, and he's got Olivier Kamwa from Finland. Just Barnes is really good at getting guys just out of nowhere that other people just don't seem to look. I've noticed.
I wanted to say, I don't think this was ran as much in Presbyterian, but in the lineup at Tennessee Tech, the lineup we ran against Tennessee Tech, that was, I believe, Chandler, Veskovi, Ziegler, Fulkerson, and Kamwa. Does that sound right? I really liked that lineup. I thought it was fast. It seemed like they got a lot of steals during that part, or during when we were running that lineup. So I would love to see that lineup more and see how that lineup fares against some stronger teams down the road.
I think when Josiah Jordan James comes back, it would be really interesting to run that exact same scheme, but have Josiah James instead of Fulke. And not necessarily because Fulke's underperforming. I think he's actually doing really well this season. But Josiah is probably better defensively. So that would give you Kamwa and Josiah, who are playing really well on the defensive end. And then you could just have the chaos of scoring. Like, Kamwa's playing well enough on offense that he could cover for Josiah, who, I mean, he's a great basketball player. He honestly might be one of the better basketball players on the team. But as far as offensive ability, there's just not much there. And that's not what he's asked to do. That's not his thing. But having that defense in the lineup and then the offensive firepower with Veskovi, with Ziegler, and with Chandler, that's borderline unstoppable if you play your cards right, if Barnes plays his cards right.
Yeah, kind of just to your point, to update on Josiah Jordan James, I think after the game Tuesday night, Rick Barnes didn't have much of an update. Basically said he's still day-to-day at this point. And he talked about it today too in his press conference. In practice, he's not doing a lot. He's not doing anything with contact, I guess is what Rick Barnes said. So outside of that, he's doing whatever he can, but still just because of that injury, just he's very limited there. Surgery, it's not really on the table. So that's good news. It's not really going to be anything long term. It's just day to day at this point. But kind of your point, the Vols have managed to hang in there despite not having James in there. I did kind of want to bring up Tennessee's 3-point shooting a little bit. Obviously, as you mentioned, that's really where they have their success, live and die by the three. Early in the season, Tennessee was shooting, 40-something threes a game. That was a record. That was in the exhibition in some of those first few games. Now it's back to high 20s, 30s. But so there's a little bit of a difference there. But Rick Barnes kind of talked about it today too, that it's just about the matchups and the teams and the players you got in. Obviously, early in the season, they didn't have John Fulkerson, so they weren't running as much, through down low as they now can. Just give it to Fulkerson, let him work. But just, I don't know, what are your thoughts on that? Does Tennessee need to get back to that 40 odd threes a game, or can they be perfectly fine here in the 20s to 30s?
I mean, I think if Justin Powell is going to be that efficient, 5 for 5, he's not always going to make all of his 3-pointers, but I mean, if they're shooting that efficiently, I don't see why you don't just let it fly from the three, especially in these upcoming games. Colorado, especially, I think it'd be a good chance to see how that works against, because they haven't shot that many threes against, higher tier programs. But I think if they pulled that out against Colorado and just kind of see how that works against a decent team in Colorado, and if it works, keep doing it. So especially if they're going to be that efficient.
I personally think it's more efficient for Barnes to have slightly. I think his thought process was always just shoot when they're open, and I think kind of toning it back a little bit is good for Tennessee, because if they have an over reliance on shooting the three, then they're gonna have an off night. I think I've actually said this on this podcast before, but my favorite NBA team is the Utah Jazz, and their problem was they just shot too many threes, and they got to the playoffs, they had an off night, and then they were booted. So if you talk about that in a Tennessee perspective, if they come, every night wanting to shoot 43 per game, and the opponent knows that they're going to shoot 43s per game, they have an off night, they're done. There's just no way to combat that, really, because then you're out of your groove. You can't really switch up mid-game to play more of a post-game with Fulkerson, Brandon Huntley Hatfield, or whoever it may be you can fill in the spot. It's just having that over-reliance is going to probably hinder the team more than it'll help. I think Olivier Comla actually said something about that like he had a quote a couple days ago that said we don't need to be over-reliant on three-pointers. We need to still play our game like the way we want to. It's just we need to take the open shots when they're there. However, Justin Powell should probably be shooting 23s per game, I think. I mean, if he's going to shoot it 40% every time, that's what, like, I'm not good at math, like 7, 8 out of 20 a game. So he needs to just keep shooting it, in my opinion.
Yeah, kind of just going back to it, the obviously college basketball nowadays or basketball in general is live and die by the three. But if you ask me, if you don't have good post play, you won't make it far in March. So now Tennessee, obviously, I wouldn't consider, Folke as like the best big man in the, nation. Same with Conlon, Huntley Hatfield, but they are very viable options down low. And to me, you need to start in the post and then kind of work your way out. To me, every possession should have at least one post touch. And to me, that opens up the floor so much, because Folke, Conlon, and now Huntley Hatfield draw so much attention down low because they are very good with their size, can shoot, 15 feet out. They're just good at what they do. And I think that just draws the defense in, sucks them in. Powell, Chandler, Vescovy, and Victor Bailey can be able to have open shots and make them. It's just, can they make them? And like you said, Ethan, if they're going for 40 a night and they don't make them, they're going to lose. So I don't think they can live and die by the three. Obviously, that's what their team is built on. But I think essentially you need to make sure you have good inside play and post presence.
If they could play a team like Presbyterian every night, I would say shoot 43s a night. But ultimately, they're going to be playing better defenses. And if we're honest, that's probably why Tennessee shot so well from the three. That's why Justin Powell shot so well from the three on Tuesday night, because it's like making a shot with their eyes closed. They could do that with their eyes closed. It's like a layup for them, because if they're standing there wide open, Presbyterian had that weird like zone thing going on in the first half that wasn't working in the slightest. And then they tried to switch up, but by that point, Tennessee was just already running away with it. So, if you could play, like I said, if you could play Presbyterian every day, yeah, shoot 43s all you want. And it's just kind of be tailored to their opponent. I feel like, Barnes is smart enough to realize, hey, we need to be doing this on offense in this game and this on offense. And another one, like you got Texas Tech coming up, who has their no middle defense, which is probably going to be a lot of 3-point shooting. But I'm not a head coach, so I don't know. But that Chris Beard's gone, I guess, so it might be a little different over there now. But I'm kind of going on a tangent. But it mostly means just kind of go by opponent, see what happens.
Yeah, that's a good transition into Tennessee playing 2 road games here in the next several days. Saturday at Colorado, and then Tuesday against Tennessee Tech, but that's in New York in Madison Square Garden. Obviously those teams are both much better than, but outside of that tournament up in Connecticut, any of the teams they faced at home, all these, kind of non-conference mid-major schools. So it'll be, the first, I don't know, they call it the first true road game for Tennessee, because you're actually at Colorado. It's not like a neutral site tournament. So it's going to be interesting to see how Tennessee does there. And just we've talked about the threes, but just right now, what stands out about either of these teams? I think they both have one loss. I think maybe they both even lost last night, Wednesday night, if I'm correct. So just kind of what stands out about these teams and what does Tennessee need to look out for?
So Texas Tech is obviously the better of the two. Like I said earlier, they lost Chris Beard, so they're not quite what they were in the past. They have the number one offensive rebounding team in the nation, though. So boards are going to be interesting, especially given Tennessee hasn't been great rebounding this year. I believe Presbyterian actually out rebounded the Vols on Tuesday. I could be wrong. They might have out rebounded or tied, but regardless, against Presbyterian, you should be out rebounding. I think the Blue Hose or whatever their name was. But you play the Red Raiders, who are the number one offensive rebounding team in the country, and it's not going to come quite as easily. Offensively, I'm not really sure how they stack up, but Colorado, I don't know too much about them. I'm going to be honest. I think it was UCLA that they just lost to, but road environment. That's really all you need to hear for that one, because anytime you go on the road and play a decent opponent, obviously a Pac-12 opponent that Tennessee played last year, they've got their 2-3 zone. It's going to be hard. It's going to be tough because you're going up against a crowd that Tennessee really hasn't faced in 2 years now, because there was COVID, and then last year it was kind of limited capacity. So Tennessee, and especially players like Kennedy Chandler, like Zakai Ziegler, like Brandon Huntley Hatfield, have not played against in a college environment, and they're important to Tennessee's team. So I think it's just going to be interesting to see how Rick Barnes is going to not calm them down, but for lack of a better word, calm them down heading into that game.
Yeah, just to interrupt real quick, Olivier Comwell was asked kind of about that same thing earlier today, and just what's the message to the freshmen? You've got these players that have never played in a crowd like this, and I thought he made an interesting point that, well, they have played in front of in Thompson Bowling Arena, so they know what a big environment's like. Now, obviously, at Thompson Bowling Arena, that crowd is favored for Tennessee. So as far as the noise and all, it's probably a little different being on the road. But I just thought that's an interesting point where maybe they have a little bit of experience, playing in an atmosphere like that, but it is just going to be a different animal being on the road as opposed to being home.
Yeah, just kind of going off of what Ethan said with this and what you all said, this being their first true road test. Like, yes, they've played Villanova, North Carolina, but that was in Connecticut, neutral site. Obviously we don't really know how much Colorado's crowd will be into it or how much that'll really play into it. But just the fact going from Tennessee to Colorado, flight differential, whatever it might be, a lot of factors going into it. Yes, Tennessee clearly has the better basketball team, but it's college basketball. You never know. College basketball this year so far has been drunk. Let's just say the least. I mean, where teams are winning, whatever it might be. I don't think it's going to happen on Saturday, but you can never say never in college basketball. Just kind of looking at Colorado's schedule, like you all said, they lost to UCLA. They only lost to them by 12. I mean, double digits. Don't really know the whole story, but that's not that bad against a top 5 opponent. But they did lose, however, it looks like to Southern Illinois by 4 and then Nebraska by 15. So like Colorado, probably your average middle of the road Pac-12 college basketball team. But, you could always get your best game against, Tennessee top 15 team. They're going to get the best game against a team like this who not supposed to beat them. So, like I said, college basketball, you never know. We'll see how these freshmen react, the 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds, how they react in a hostile environment potentially. So that's what I'm looking forward to on Saturday.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I think this will be a great opportunity just to get some experience for these guys. I obviously think that it will be a win and hopefully a pretty easy win. But yeah, it'll be a great environment. I imagine Colorado has a pretty fun, a pretty energetic environment. So it'll be good to get that under these young guys' belt before they head into Memphis and a few other road games or neutral site games for Memphis and Texas Tech.
Yeah, that's an interesting point that you all brought up, just with how crazy college basketball is, because the other night, I know we've talked about it a little bit, but before Tennessee Tech, Rick Barnes thought Tennessee did not have a good practice. Specifically, some of the younger guys, Kennedy Chandler is one that he mentioned, that just didn't have a good practice, wasn't taking it that seriously. And it kind of showed in the game, and obviously Tennessee still won. by a decent amount. Let's see if I can pull up the score, 80-69. So in the end, just the better roster prevailed, but there were quite a bit of time, early on in the game. I think Tennessee went at halftime and they were trailing. So it is what it is. And obviously, as we said, they really corrected that. Kennedy Chandler had a much better practice, the day before the Presbyterian game. But it's something to watch. Just, is that going to be an issue going forward? Was that just a one-time deal with Chandler being a freshman? He just doesn't know what to do yet, or what's going on?
I think college basketball is a lot more mental than, say, NBA would be. I think, like you said, how Barnes talked about how they had a bad practice. I think that carries over a lot. If you have a bad practice, you may not have a bad game, but you're at least going to have a slow start once you get back in the swing of things. And I think that's kind of why we see these upsets, because especially, our team's got two 17-year-olds. There's probably a lot of other college teams that have 17, 18-year-olds. So I think, if they have a bad practice, if they're not shooting well, if they feel like they're off the rhythm, that's going to stick with them a lot more than it would NBA guys who've been doing it for years. So I think that's kind of why we see these upsets, and that's something Tennessee kind of has to pay attention to, and not let these bad practices or like a bad shooting performance go to their head, and just be able to prevail through that.
I think the other thing is too, it was the day after Thanksgiving. So like they could have been a little full from the turkey. They could have fallen asleep a little bit, belly's a little full, and they still won by 11. Yeah, it should have been by a lot more, whatever, Tennessee Tech. But obviously you could tell they slept walk into it just a little bit, and you could tell in the first half. Second half, they woke up a little bit, but Tennessee Tech hung right with them. Let's just be honest. They were not afraid going into it. They knew they had a tall task at hand, but they played Tennessee very well. Tennessee still came out and won. So and obviously you saw Tuesday, much better effort, won by 42. So it's like you said, college basketball, different animal any other day of the week. But I think that also had to correlate with the holiday the day before. Tough game, kind of, you're full. You don't really want to do anything on Black Friday, but they did, and they won. But I think we'll see a much more elevated team going through the rest of the season.
Yeah. Ultimately, when it comes down to it, like, good teams will come out on top. And Tennessee Tech played a really good game. It wasn't even necessary. And I kind of agree with Riley's points that it was probably just a young team not expecting Tennessee Tech to give them a challenge. But, I mean, it's John Pelfrey. He used to be the coach over at Arkansas, and like he's an SEC level coach, and he's got some good players there too. So, and they've played well in some of their other games this season. It's just Tennessee Tech is not as, like, I don't know what I'm trying to say 100%. Some of these teams at the bottom are just not as bad as you would think they would be necessarily. Even Presbyterian, they were 5-2 heading into the Tennessee game. So there's always these teams, these little mid-major teams that you just wouldn't expect that can beat any team on any given night. Stephen F. Austin beat Duke the other, just a few years ago. Utah Valley, I'm going to bring them up again. Utah Valley beat BYU the other night. You just got all these little tiny schools beating these big schools just because that's just how college basketball works.
Yeah, there'll be plenty to watch for, see how Tennessee's preparation is. I think it's going to be much better. I don't think we're going to have a lot of repeats of Tennessee Tech going forward. So Saturday, 2 p.m., Colorado. Tuesday at 7 p.m. That's Texas Tech at Madison Square Garden. Of course, full coverage, UTDailyBeacon.com. You can always check it out there. Let's talk some women's basketball now, though. Lady Vols, they played their Thanksgiving, what's it called? South Point Thanksgiving Shootout Tournament. That was in Las Vegas. Right after Thanksgiving, they went 2-0 there. Came home. Just last night, Wednesday night, they hosted Tennessee Tech, and they blew them out pretty handily. So, Riley, Andrew, just what are your biggest takeaways from that game, and just Tennessee's 3-0 stretch there?
Yeah, obviously, early in the season or the start of the season, the offense has been kind of struggling a little bit, or kind of a lot of bit, honestly. But these last two games, and the first one against Kansas, the offense was okay. But these last two games, they have been shooting the ball tremendously, a lot better. the depth or the scoring different, like the everybody's contributing basically. It's not just been Jordan Horston like it was kind of against UCF early in the season. Like last night, I think you had 3 or 4 players in double figures. You had Tamari Key with 11, Alexis Dye had 20, Tess Darby had 12. So it's a lot bigger contribution from each player now. Obviously, Ray Burrell is still out. Coach Harper said it's kind of indefinite timetable right now. She's not really given a whole lot, which is understandable. But honestly, right now, they don't really need her. Now, they kind of do on Sunday against Virginia Tech. But last night, it was an interesting game. Tech had the lead, and Coach Harper said their game plan going into it, it was a lot different than what Tennessee has played all season. They kind of played a 5-out, and that does not bode well for Tennessee when they have Tamari Key, who is a 6'6", dominant in the paint like that. They try to get her out of the paint, and it worked in the first quarter. Tennessee Tech's Mackenzie Coleman, she was making threes. Tamari Key was just not used to it. And at halftime, they shut him down. Third quarter, Tennessee Tech shot 1 for, I think, 15, scored 5 points, and then the Lady Vols just took over. So a different game plan going into it. And I think that could be bode well, or teams could look at that in the future and see that that's how you kind of go against the Lady Vols, because their defense is just dominant. Let's just be honest. They have played tremendous defensively. So it'll be interesting to see going forward what teams try and do to get Tamari Key out of the paint, to not clog it up, and if they can just outshoot Tennessee at this point. So
yeah, it must be just something about Tennessee Tech basketball programs that give Tennessee problems in the first half. But yeah, like Riley said, they're just rolling right now. I think that win over Texas in overtime just kind of sparked something in them, because they got 3 straight double-digit wins, and a great win last night. They've got a pretty relaxed week coming up. They've got Virginia Tech Sunday, and then have an entire week off before taking on Georgia State. So not too tough of matchups. But I think one thing there's been a lot of factors that go into their success recently, but I think a big one is actually Tess Darby. Not a huge name. I don't think a lot of people would recognize that name unless they follow Lady Vol hoops pretty closely, but she's a 6'1" forward, sophomore, and she can just shoot the ball so well. And we didn't see that at first. She wasn't shooting that well through those first couple of games, but ever since that tournament in Las Vegas, she's been able to light it up from beyond. She's super efficient, and I think that's one of the bigger factors in Tennessee's success. So, and then obviously there's the Tamari Key point, the Jordan Horston point, all those points that have already been made. So
Yeah, I remember last season when Tess Darby came in as a freshman, that was the thing that Kelly Harper and everybody else said about her, was that she can shoot like crazy. She just didn't have much of a role last year with, the starters playing and whatever it was. But now that she's come onto the scene, and I know we kind of talked about it earlier, but they finally have some offensive depth, after relying on, Ray Burrell at first, and then she goes down, and then it was kind of Jordan Horston show there for a while. But she kind of struggled last night. She finished in single-digit points, right? But that didn't matter because Alexis Dye finally had a good game. You have some of these other scoring yet, though. You kind of talked about it, but just how important is that, for Tennessee? How much dangerous does that make them now, that if they finally have some depth in their scoring?
yeah, like we said last night, Alexis Dye had 20 points. That was definitely her. She's had good games before, but I think honestly last night could have been her coming out party. Obviously, she was the Sun Belt Player of the Year last year for Troy. Coming into the year, I think she had pretty high expectations. Obviously, Player of the Year, like I just said, but a couple other games she had double-digit performances, but nothing like too crazy. And then some games she was kind of underwhelming, but last night she was on fire. She just got to her spot a couple of times in the second quarter, and she just could not miss. I mean, every shot that I thought she was going to put up was going to go in at one point. I think at the end of the night, she may have missed only 3 or 4 shots. It was funny. She even said at the end of the game, somebody asked her what was working for you tonight? And she just said, well, they're just leaving me open. And she kept on making it. And then she wanted to say they really couldn't guard me either. So, I mean, she's just being honest. But I think that was kind of her coming out party. Like you said, Andrew, Tess Darby, these last three games, she has been shooting tremendously. I think she's trying to get used to the starting role now because Ray Burrell is still being out. She had to, probably she wasn't used to starting, because some nervousness, completely understandable. but she's coming into her own. She's definitely Tennessee's sniper, 4 for 6 last night on threes. So if they can just continue to shoot well from the perimeter, Tess Darby, Horston will be fine. Everybody has a bad night, whatever. They didn't need her last night. Tennessee Tech, not a big deal. She'll be okay. If they can get contributions from Tess Darby, Dye keeps on shooting well from the mid range, and Jordan Horston does Jordan Horston things, they'll be more than okay.
Yeah, and I think one of their biggest points in these couple of games heading into before SEC starts, but I think it's a big thing for them to try to get these players some experience because there are a lot of freshmen on this team. They were able to do that last night, obviously having the lead that they did. I believe Kaya Wynn had 6 points, and then obviously Sarah Puckett and a few of the regular freshmen continue to play. So I think that's another big thing for them. And I think it almost, and Alexis Dye isn't a new player to college basketball, but she is new to Tennessee, so she got her night as well. And so it's kind of nice that they're getting these early games where a new player can step up every night.
So looking ahead to this week, you got Sunday at Virginia Tech. Just what's the biggest key to that one for the Lady Vols to come back to Knoxville with the win?
So Coach Harper said last night Virginia Tech has a pro prospect and Elizabeth Keatley. She is a 6'6" center, so same height as Tamari Key, averaging 19 points a game. She is the biggest. That's the most interesting matchup to me, and will be the story as to whether Tennessee will win or lose on Sunday. Coach Harper said they have her and they surround her with perimeter shooting. They shoot at a 39% clip from three-point range, far better than Tennessee at this point in the season. So they've got shooters and they've got a really big presence down low in Elizabeth Keatley. So this is Tamari Key's biggest challenge. So can she, do what she's been doing, blocking, 4 or 5 shots a game, getting a triple-double like she did against Texas, getting double-digit rebounds, dominating down low. Like last night, she literally had no problem getting layups, rebounds, blocking shots after one after another. Can she continue to do that against probably her toughest matchup too this season? So I think that's the biggest test. Can Tamari Key slow down Elizabeth Keatley, and can Tennessee just continue to shoot at a high clip like they have been these last couple of games?
Yeah, and not only can Tamari Key defend well, but can she do it well without fouling? That was the biggest point early in the season. She was just playing, 15, maybe 20 minutes a game because she kept getting foul trouble. So can she do that well without fouling is going to be a big point. But yeah, it's going to be a great matchup for her. She hasn't seen anybody really of that caliber. I think Texas had a center that was close to her size, but still Key was towering over her and dominating the paint. So yeah, that'll be a great matchup. Horston and Walker will both probably need to step up. I don't think that they can have the kind of games that they did last night and come out with a win here. So yeah, it'll be a good test for them.
I think another thing about last night too is Mackenzie Coleman. She was a 6'3" center, but she could shoot threes. But she scored all of her points in the first quarter, and then they just shut her down. So now Elizabeth Keatley, I think she's, according to their stat book, she's only attempted 1 3. So it looks like she's kind of more of a presence like Tamari Key is. So I think that bodes well in the matchup, that Tamari Key can stay around the block, do what she does, altering shots. So can she just continue to do what she's been doing this season? Like you said, Andrew, her toughest matchup by far this season. I'm really excited to watch that game, honestly. This will be, obviously they went to UCF, but UCF is not Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech's only lost 1 game so far. Really good team in general. So outside of Texas, this is definitely Tennessee's one of their toughest matchups.
Yeah, well, we'll have, as always, coverage of that at the utdailybeacon.com. That happens Sunday at 2:00. So look out for that. I guess we'll wrap it up here. Thanks for listening to another episode. Do we have anything you got to get off your chest real fast before we end, or are we good here? We're all good. I'm seeing thumbs up. All right. Well, thanks y'all for being here. Thanks everybody for listening.